Well, it has been 10 years since True Detective, at least the first season, came out, and I thought I would commemorate the occasion by doing another analysis video. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these. I apologize. It's just I've been really busy this year, and I've been also just been caught up with a lot of other things, a lot of conversations, the podcast. I'll go on. But I know you guys were looking forward to the analysis videos, and this is the second one I'm going to be doing about True Detective, the first season at least, which is considered by many, including myself, to be one of the finest television shows ever put on the small screen. It has a lot of things going for it, great cinematography, the great storytelling from Nick Pizzolatto, and the two great leading performances from Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, respectively. I won't say too much except for there will be spoilers in this. I will be spoiling the whole thing. I will be talking about very specific moments from the series. I will be discussing very specific thematic depths that the series goes into. So if you haven't watched the show, I would recommend go off, watch the show, come back, and watch this, and you'll get more of a idea of what I'm talking about. Or don't. I mean, if you don't care about spoilers, that's fine too. But I wanted to warn you in case you are wary of spoilers. There will be spoilers in this video. So, yeah, let's get to it. There have been many stories throughout the years that have confronted the problem of evil and how we are to cope with a world that seems overwhelmed by evil and the depravities that human beings are capable of. There have been films, shows, comics, and books written about the subject of evil and how we can fight it and cope with its existence. True Detective captures what great noir should, attempting to find the light in the face of pure evil. And for those who don't know what True Detective is, at least the first season follows the story of two detectives, Rustin Cole and Martin Hart, played by Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, respectively, as they investigate a series of gruesome murders that are revealed to have occult ties to them over the course of 17 years. There are references to pessimistic philosophy, cosmic horror authors such as Robert Chambers and Ambrose Bierce, and local voodoo lore that's been covered to death on a lot of YouTube. But that's not what I'm here to discuss today. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote that when you gaze into the abyss gazes unto you. And True Detective explores men who are forced to stare at the abyss and their differing reactions to it. But also it is about one of the oldest stories that mankind has come up with. Light versus dark, to quote Rust at the end of the series. Today I hope to explore the theme of this series of how people cope with evil by analyzing three of the major characters of the story. Rust, Marty, and Errol Childress, or the Yellow King as he's known. Rust is probably the most interesting character of the show, and he's my personal favorite, even if I wouldn't personally have a drink with the guy. He's an arrogant, know-it-all prick who seems to make it his life's mission to make everyone as miserable as he is. But once you learn his backstory, you come to understand why he's this way. His life almost seems like a cruel practical joke played by the cosmos. Okay, I'm paraphrasing H.P. Lovecraft a little bit. He once had a daughter who tragically passed away after being hit by a car, and it's clear that this really destroyed him on the inside. And this, alongside seeing the absolute worst depravities that people are capable of, causes him to become the cynical, nihilistic shell of a man that we meet in 2012. All Rust has ever seen is the heartlessness and cruelty of the world, and it's twisted him into a broken man with nothing left to lose. To cope with the constant horror and depravity, he wears his cynicism like armor, often speaking eloquently about the utter meaninglessness of it all and how the honorable thing it would be to do is to just stop existing. He wears his cynicism like an armor when deep down he does care about the state of the world, and he's completely aghast, much like the rest of these characters, about just how far the world has fallen. Writer Nick Pizzolatto was inspired by philosopher Peter Wessel Zapf and cosmic horror writer Thomas Ligotti, who wrote the nonfiction book The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which I have not read, but is said to be very good, and Pizzolatto pulls a lot from it in this book. In this show, sorry. Pizzolatto captured it so well that there were even some of Ligotti's fans and scholars who accused Pizzolatto of plagiarism. Even though if you look at several articles and stories. Pizzolatto has acknowledged Legati's influence, and I even got blocked by a friend of mine for bringing this up. So it really irritates the Legati fans for some reason. I would personally be happy about it, but I'm getting ahead of myself, or I'm going on a non sequitur. I find people who use this critique miss the point of the story. And to quote Shy's Right Foot, who made a really good video on the subject of pessimism in True Detective Season 1, I'll link his video down below. Pizzolatto is not merely copying Legati, he is refuting him. He is taking Legati's pessimistic philosophies and shows just how broken and miserable someone has to be in order to believe Legati's personal philosophy. Pizzolatto is not merely imitating Legati, he is taking the beliefs and he's taking his beliefs and extending them to their logical conclusion. Rust's character showcases the self-defeating nature of cynicism. Rust's nihilistic spiels are nothing more than a defense, so he won't have to deal with the constant psychological and emotional pain that he's in every day of his life. So instead of facing his grief and trauma, he claims to know the truth, that nothing matters, everything is meaningless, and the best thing our species can do can just be to stop existing. One of the most unsettling sequences in the show is how Cole attempts to twist his daughter's death into something that's positive, claiming that he was spared from being a father. It's little wonder that the cops who end up interviewing Cole in 2012 begin suspecting that he might be the Yellow King, because, yeah, as the one cop says, Tori Kittle says, does that seem like a very stable individual to you? But it isn't until he actually faces death that he finally gains the will to keep living and to keep seeking the light in the world, ending the show with one of my favorite ending lines in any piece of media.
Once there is only dark. Yes, any lights winning.
On the other hand, we have Marty. At first glance, he seems like a straight guy to Cole's eccentric, navel-gazy weirdness, but as the story moves along, he showcases more depth than first imagined. Much like Cole, he's forced to stare into the abyss every day as a result of his job, and he encounters some of the most heinous, spine-tingling cruelties that man can come up with. And like Cole, he doesn't really know how to handle it. Marty showcases throughout the series that he's unwilling to deal with his issues in a healthy manner. He runs from the abyss because he doesn't know how to handle it, so he attempts to distract himself with drinking, having sex with other women who aren't his wife, and generally just being an irresponsible prick. When his wife Maggie attempts to get him to open up and, talk about his feelings and all that, he lashes out and accuses her of self-pity, which, nice projection there, Marty. Marty might not be as cerebral as Cole, but he proves to be struggling with the same battle that Rust is, even if he doesn't want to face it. He doesn't really know how to even comprehend the cruelty he sees at his work, so he prefers not to. It's his tendency to run away from his problems that ultimately leaves him where he's at by 2012. As Maggie later says, Marty never truly knew himself, and he was in denial about his own existential crisis. But once he loses Maggie and his two daughters, does he truly begin to reflect and realize what he is, who he is as a person, what he truly cares about. He's still a flawed man, and still has his head up his ass in a few ways, but he definitely has more clarity about his purpose in 2012, and remembers why he was a detective in the first place, to keep the other bad men from the door, as Rust would say. And eventually he ends up finding some form of redemption through solving the Yellow King case, even if not everything in his life has been settled just yet. We don't know too much about Errol Childress, also known as the Yellow King, or the creature in the tall grass, as director Cary Fukunaga called him. And I think that's what makes him so frightening. We don't know all that much about him, other than the brief time that we see him and the information we end up learning about him in the show from secondary sources. But once we meet him, astute audience members will see similarities between Errol and Rust. Both are highly intelligent men who have dealt with some of the most horrific atrocities mankind can dish out. Yet, unlike Rust, who wrestles with the abyss despite himself and his pessimistic philosophies and keeps fighting for whatever reason, Errol embraces the abyss. I actually find his speech, sermon, whatever you want to call it, to be not only luring Rust deeper into Carcosa, but also a taunt. It also adds this to this nice, supernatural, surreal presence that Errol exudes. He can see, there's almost that sense that he can see Rust's pain, and it's cute compared to the horrors he's seen and experienced. The cruelty that was done to him by the Carcosa cult twisted him into a monster who continued the cycle of violence and suffering that victimized him and so many others that we learn about throughout the series. He is so lost within the dark that there is little hope that he could ever see the light, and that's his tragedy ultimately. But he also serves as a warning to Rust, and he's the man who ultimately wakes Rust up to the fact that perhaps life is worth preserving after all, though, of course, he has to do it in the harshest way possible, and in a way that nearly kills Rust. So, what is the point of all this? What is True Detective Season 1 attempting to convey? Well, much like other works of its kind and works of the noir genre, True Detective offers the audience an answer to the question of how do we cope with evil. Like other works such as Seven or No Country for Old Men, True Detective contends that evil exists and will always exist as long as there will be people. But at the same time, there is also good in our world, and that good is worth preserving. It is this that Rust and Marty find out as the story moves along, that the purpose of life is not merely to stew in cynicism and despair, but to fight for what is good, or the light, as Rust says. True Detective joins the great works of noir by showing that where there's light, there's a chance, and where there's life, there is hope. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis video. I don't know when the next one will come out. This took a few months for me to put together, or well, not put together. It took me a few months to write it down, and then it took me a few months to find the time to record this. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys watched True Detective Season 1 before you got here. It's a great show. It's one of my favorites. The other two seasons, second one I don't like as much, and the third one I think is pretty underrated. And the fourth one, I won't get into that. Anyway, I'll just do the usual outro things. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can check me out on Twitter. You can also find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent, or analysis in this case, that is probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. You can also find me on Instagram, where I post from time to time. And you can also find me on Blue Sky, even though I don't really use Blue Sky very much. Also on Discord, if you want to come join me and hang out with me on there. I am also like, subscribe, do all that stuff. As my buddy John Minton likes to say, it feels good. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. It took a while to put together. And I also hope you guys enjoyed True Detective. It really is a masterpiece of not only the noir genre, but of the horror genre as well. So, yeah. Till next time.